In 2013, the Little Traverse Bay Band's Odawa Indians implemented the Lake Michigan Cisco Rehabilitation Program. The goal of the program is to inform future lake-wide rehabilitation efforts by accomplishing two objectives. The first is to provide a baseline status about any potential remaining cisco and their preferred habitats. The second objective, shown here in this video, is to evaluate the rearing and stocking of the native ciscos as a management option for rehabilitation. Great Lakes Fisheries biologist Kevin Donner looks for any ciscos that may be caught in the net. Oh, here's one. The ciscos are then placed into horse troughs that contain an anesthetic, designed to keep the fish relaxed while they're being transported. And then into a temporary holding pen before being spawned. The female's eggs are deposited into the mixing container, followed by the milt of the male cisco. Fisheries and wildlife technician Chris Dye completes the fertilization process by mixing the eggs and the milt together with either a saline solution or pure hatchery water. Fertilized cisco eggs.
So right now we have 23 containers of viable cisco eggs in varying densities. The small containers, these are about 1 3/4 liters, are filled with what we call experimental eggs. So we're looking at 2 experiments right now. We're trying to figure out if there is a benefit to the immediate spawning of these fish, or if it's better to take the time and do it in a controlled environment. So we've got one experiment that's looking at spawning these fish on a boat versus spawning them in a controlled shore environment. So we have 5 replicates of each treatment in these little jars. And we also have another experiment that's looking at sperm motility enhancement. So we're using saline solution. It's a 0.7% solution. What it does is it increases in other salmonids the efficacy of fish sperm from roughly 15 seconds to over a minute. And so our thought there is if we do this with cisco, we may be able to get better fertilization rates. So we'll be checking fertilization rate, ability to develop to the eye up stage, which is in approximately 20 days for these fish, and then overall hatch success, looking at those 2 different treatments. And then over on this side, we have more experimentals, 20 in total. We also have 3 jars that represent our production fish, and right now we have roughly 600,000 production eggs. They're in these large jars. These fish have no other purpose at this point than production, unless we decide to do some experimental with the larvae, post-larvae, or even in the juvenile stage. Right now we're doing a daily formalin treatment. We use formalin as a preventative for some of the more nasty kinds of fungus that can get into eggs. Generally, on the reef, eggs aren't sitting on top of each other like they do in a fish hatchery. And so what we can see is that we get infiltration of fungus. And so we use the formalin to prevent that.
Thousands and thousands of ciscos that have reached the eye up stage are gently incubating. The eggs tumble about as they would in their natural environment on a Great Lakes reef. The main bulk of hatching has begun.
So these are the cisco from 2015. They're just starting to absorb their yolk sac. We're feeding them really fine powder. It's actually measured out, it's 0.1 millimeters. It sits on the surface of the water really well. If you see them breaking the surface, they're up there feeding. We're doing an experiment on marking. So each one of these jars started out with 200. Different concentrations, whether they had 500 parts per million or 7, 9, or 9. For fish, it marks their bones really well. So 6-hour bath, they come out, and we can read them years later that they've been marked.
And these are the 1-year-old ciscos that will be stocked this year in 2016. The Little Traverse Bay bands have stocked roughly 65,000 Ciscos since their program began. And finally, these are the 2-year-old Ciscos that are being kept for further research.